Welcome to Experian Talks, protecting yourself against ID fraud. Now, in this episode, I'm going to talk you through briefly some of the most common ways that fraudsters can steal your details. And for each one, what I'll do is spend a bit of time just telling you how you can protect yourself the best way possible. But let's talk about what ID fraud really is. And this means that someone is a fraudster, has obtained enough of your personal information and details, and they're using that for their own financial gain. And usually that means applying for new credit in your name. So if you check your credit report and you're a victim of ID fraud, what you might see is new applications for credit that weren't yours and new accounts that also don't belong to you. But depending on when you discover it, you may even see a defaulted account or a court judgment in your name. Now, if that happens and you are a victim of ID fraud, then you can get help from Experian or a credit reference agency to query all of that. Now let's jump right in. So firstly, and perhaps a more traditional way, is a fraudster getting hold of your post. Now this one's going to be really important for anyone who lives in shared accommodation, has maybe a shared postal area, or perhaps just anyone that's moving address. And also we can kind of include students here as well. But if a fraudster gets hold of your letters or your post, then they're far more likely to have the information and details they need to apply for credit in your name. So what we'll talk about as well is what you do with any letters or statements that come through. But the best way to protect yourself here is to move everything online. Now this takes a little bit of time, but go to each lender, you might have an online account, and switch to online statements. That means you limit as much information as you can that's coming through to your home address. But if you do get letters or you have personal information at home, always make sure it's fully destroyed before you get rid of it. So invest in a shredder if you need to. Well, I talked about students as well, but students can, if they want to, just keep things registered at their parents' or family address to avoid having that information come through. Now, the second one I want to talk about is fraudsters stealing your information digitally. And although that sounds a little bit scary, and it is, but there's plenty that we can do to prevent it. Now, it's quite a wide area and there's lots of things in here. So I'll talk about each of these very briefly. Now, first is hacking your home broadband, setting up a fake public Wi-Fi, sending emails with fake links or attachments, getting viruses onto your computer or mobile devices, and also text messages that you get. Now, whenever you deal with anything online, it's just important to be careful with what you do, and including getting online. So here's my tips for how to keep yourself safe. And the first is make sure your home broadband is secured. And that means putting a strong password on there. Now, if you're unsure of how to do that, speak to your broadband provider. But the second one is when you're connecting to public Wi-Fi, never use it to log into online banking or typing passwords in there, because they could be fake, they could be set up by fraudsters, but people can also monitor them as well. Now, if you receive an email, never follow the links or attachments that you get in that email. Now, you can check if an email is genuine by usually checking off some of the spelling, the grammar, even the email it's come from. But my best advice is never follow a link in an email, go directly to the site. Now, the next one to talk about is your passwords. Now, often lots of people will have the same password for all of their accounts, but it's really important to have unique passwords that nobody can guess for each of your accounts. Now, the other one I want to talk about here as well is scam ads, because you'll often see these online with celeb faces promoting something, usually something to invest in, but it could be a way to get your personal information and details. So always be careful. Really, you want to be careful about any advert that you see on social media with a celeb's face on. Now, the third one I want to talk about is phishing scams. And really, I want to focus on phone scams, but phishing really means where someone's contacting you just trying to get that bit of information. And they're very clever. What they do is they call you, and they often catch you off guard, pretending to be someone from your bank or your mobile phone provider, and they start asking for details. Now, just a note, there are other scams too, where they claim that they may need to download software to your computer or from your bank asking you to transfer money to another account because of fraud. So there's lots of them, but my advice there is just avoid them. Never do it. Hang up, contact the company directly. And that's my number one rule, which is never give out your personal details. Now, it's quite common for us to be polite and compliant when someone calls, particularly if they're from a company that you actually have a relationship with. But it's just vital you don't give away information. So politely tell them that you'll call back later and that you're busy. And then later on, or even the next day, just go directly to their website. Never follow new links or emails that you've got within a short space of time of that call. And contact them directly on the phone number on the website to check how genuine it is. But I mentioned text messages. Now, I really want to talk about that because it's blown up in the past couple of years, particularly around COVID-related scams. And also fairly recently, we'll have seen a lot about deliveries. So what you'll typically see here is a text message from a company saying they tried to deliver or they need to deliver a package, and maybe there's a fee or give you a link that you need to rearrange delivery for. So my advice here is very simple. Do not do it. Do not follow the link unless you're very, very, very confident that you are getting a package from that company. But still, my advice would be go to the company's website directly or contact them directly. My last bit of advice here is don't reply to the number. Don't send anything back, even if you're telling them stop contact you, because then they'll know that it's a genuine number and there's someone at the end. Now, my next one is you could be more likely to be a victim of ID fraud if you've been the victim of a robbery or a burglary. And that's because people can often, or fraudsters can often find themselves in very quick and easy possession of your ID documents, bills and statements and other personal information. So really what you want to do here is, and as a good tip, is just make sure your documents are secure somewhere at home and, as hidden away as possible. And of course, make sure that your home is secure. But if you're going out and about, try not to travel with all of your important documents together. So you might have your handbag with your driving license and your passport, even some bills or statements that you might have just thrown in there. So always be careful about what you're leaving the house with as well. Now, the last area that I want to focus on is around social media. Now, this one's really important because when a fraudster is trying to get hold of your information, they're usually piecing it together from different sources unless they manage to use a phishing scam to get you to provide them with all your details. So it's really important, particularly where you have multiple social media platforms and what you might be sharing across each of them. And really that could result in a bit of a gold mine for a fraudster. So I want to really emphasize this point is never overshare information, particularly personal information like your mother's maiden name, pets' names, and other things that people could use, even things that you might include in your password, because lots of people use personal information in their passwords as well. But also the stuff you're sharing, like when you're on holiday, where you live, when you're away from the house, and all of that leaves you vulnerable, even to, like we just talked about, robbery, things like that. So you want to be really careful. So focus here when you're on social media about the personal information and not sharing too much online. Now, set your privacy settings correctly across each platform. Now, if you don't want anyone else seeing it, just your connected friends, make sure that's in place. And then make sure that if your accounts and your profiles are public, you're always careful about what you share. So thanks for joining this video. Hopefully I've shared some tips on how to keep yourself safe and more protected from fraudsters.